You're listening to the 4-Phase Cycle Podcast with your hosts, Dr. Alex and Megan of Zesty Ginger. If you're looking to naturally balance hormones and learn how to work with your body instead of against it, you've definitely come to the right place. As a duo of an integrative MD and a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner and best friends, we use the 4 phases of the female cycle in combination with functional lab work and mindset practices to transform the lives of the women we work with.
We also have a whole lot of fun along the way. If you're new around here, it's best to start with season 1 before jumping around and plan to roll up your sleeves. Showing up for ourselves and enjoying our lives is what good health is all about. Just a quick reminder though, this information is not intended to diagnose, manage, or treat disease. Always consult with your doctor before making changes.
Hello, Dr. Alex here. Thank you for joining me today. We are going to be talking about melatonin and cortisol today for this short podcast. So, melatonin and cortisol are going to be crucial for those of you who are dealing with things like fatigue, crash of energy in the afternoon, maybe cravings in the afternoon and low energy into the evening. You can be dealing with insomnia, whether it's going to sleep, you're having a hard time, or you're waking up in the middle of the night. Now, hopefully you also listen to the other cortisol advanced pod classes because that'll really get us started. But if you're following along and you have your Dutch, we're going to be hanging out on page 5 talking about the relationship between what happens to cortisol overnight and what happens to melatonin. Now, when we do functional testing, right? You can get a melatonin and cortisol in the blood on waking, but if you go back and listen to the other podclasses, I explained why we don't do that because it's, especially for cortisol, it's knowing both how much was told to be made from the brain to the adrenals and then how much we ultimately ended up using. And so that topic still, of course, is going to be super relevant. But this discussion is really going to focus on the relationship and the playing off each other of melatonin and cortisol. So the important thing to know about these hormones is that the body does not do them simultaneously. We are either on the cortisol train because there is something that is threatening in our world and we are waking up, or we are on the melatonin train, everything is okay, and the body is, safe to go to sleep and essentially shut down.
Quick interruption to personally invite you to come join us for our super exciting and incredibly actionable free video training series coming up.
It's a 3-part series where we cover everything hormone-related that you ever wanted to know about. We share top 5 favorite hormone helpers, talk through common hormonal imbalances, and discuss setting yourself up for success. Go to zestyginger.com/blueprint to sign up or click the link in the show notes below. We can't wait to hang out with you.
Go do it now and grab a friend. We'll see you there.
It's almost impossible for the body to be on both trains because the body does not like waste. If you really think about how the body works, it barely ever wastes anything. And if it's doing that, it's because it has a better reason for wasting that, is being outweighed by something else. And so what can happen with cortisol and melatonin is when our cortisol is dysregulated and it ends up being too high overnight, whether that's for a gut infection or a systemic pathogen, or you got low blood sugar in the middle of the night and you spiked your cortisol, or you have an early cortisol awakening response because you have stress, right? Stress at night moves our cortisol awakening response up. So that's why when you're trying to catch a flight the next morning and you're like, I really need a good night's sleep, that's why you can't sleep well, right? And you wake up early. It's that cortisol awakening response. So really, this is where we start to say, how can we get the body on the appropriate train at the right time? And so a lot of times we'll see people will have high cortisol. And if that's the case, at first the body will still release melatonin, but it won't use it if the cortisol is high. But after a while, the body's like, you know what? Why make melatonin if we're going to make a bunch of cortisol? A lot of times it will also stop releasing it. Now, it can go directly to that. It doesn't have to be a stepwise thing. But that happens really commonly where if there's a bunch of cortisol around, then the melatonin is not used by the body. Again, that is a conservation thing, not because the body's out to not make you sleep. And so when we have a high waking cortisol, which the waking really represents the cortisol we made all night, we broke it down into metabolites, and then those metabolites sit in our bladder until we wake up to pee in the morning, and that's when we're testing, right? So when that's high all night from any cause, it will not allow melatonin to act, and it can even decrease the release of it. And so in the beginning, sometimes we can outcompete the cortisol by taking melatonin and kind of outweighing the amount of cortisol that's around and saying, well, the melatonin is winning. But as you can imagine, that's a very short-term answer. That's not actually going to help the cause of that. Now, low melatonin can also happen because we don't have the building blocks, and that happens with a lot of nutrient deficiencies. And you'll hear, as I have been explaining all these imbalances, nutritional deficiencies really play a role across the board. And then also with gut dysfunction, it's up to the pineal gland to kick off creating melatonin, but then our gut makes the rest of it. So gut dysfunction can also play a role. But again, those two, while common, they're not as common as this broken cortisol melatonin deal that really underlies so much of what the body is doing. And so when we think about low melatonin, we can think about really supporting the creation of it. It's like the B vitamins, magnesium, zinc, glutathione, those kind of things can be helpful for melatonin, but also we have to address the reasons that the cortisol dysregulation is there. So that's in the previous Podclass, we want to keep addressing really the root cause, in that if the melatonin is simply not getting made because the cortisol story is off, then we don't need to necessarily fight for melatonin if we can address the cortisol. And hopefully that makes sense. And so that happens over time, right? We impact the cortisol where we can help at night bring the cortisol down to a relaxing place. These are things like valerian root, holy basil tea, lavender, chamomile. These are all teas that I use in my life just in the evening, kind of gently bring that cortisol down. And of course, there are heavier hitters, but those need to be used much more cautiously and with a provider. And then in the morning, a lot of times people's cortisol is too high at night and they don't have enough for the morning. So we can really think of it as a lever that we're pushing down the cortisol at night, or encouraging it to be normal, which is low at night, and then helping get more oomph in the morning. And as these podclasses build, you can kind of see there's adaptogens when people have adrenal problems that can give more up. There's when their tissues aren't working well, mitochondrial support and nutrient density support that can be given. And all of that is really going to help shift this relationship between cortisol and melatonin. But really what I want you to get from this episode is that it's not one of those things that, oh, your cortisol is high, let's outcompete it with melatonin, and you do that forever. No, that was literally just my way of saying, hey, there's a Band-Aid if you're being really miserable at night, but it's that further digging and that the moving around and normalizing of cortisol release that'll essentially make that a much happier process. And of course, if it's also being impacted by gut dysfunction leading to low melatonin, sometimes, that can be a process that takes longer to normalize. But again, you'll notice that's a real root cause. These are all things once we help the cortisol figure itself out, help the gut by getting the immune system back online and supporting it, you can see over time we're going to actually impact what's going wrong and changing it. We're not just going to be long-term covering things up and hope that works. All right, so this is going to be a short little episode. I'll give you a little taste of the melatonin life. But as always, thank you so much for coming to hang out with me and for learning about the body and for helping the word get out there that the female body is amazing and there are things that you can do to feel empowered, to feel amazing in it. Alrighty, thanks for stopping by, and I will catch you on the next episode.
Thanks for coming out to hang with us on the podcast. It is our goal to transform the way women are treated in healthcare. And we need your help. We need your help to get the word out. We have a lofty goal of 1 million downloads. And we know that as this podcast grows, we're going to be able to reach more women, get more amazing speakers for you, and bring the most cutting-edge information.
If you found these podclasses helpful, please take a moment to text 5 women you know the link to the series. We appreciate your help so much. Can't wait to see you next time.